Hello guys, thank you for joining me in the live class today. The idea of today is I often find guys saying they're battling with their shadings. Specifically, I'm thinking now of doing when you're doing portraits and stuff to get that nice smooth shading of the skin and stuff. So I've got 10 different ways for you that I'm going to show you how you can get nice blendings with your pencil drawing. Some of them is for getting nice smooth shadings, but other of them is to get a nice range or a nice blend from one tonal value to the next. So there's a few different ways of doing it to get those nice little shadings. Hey Harwant, how are you doing? Alrighty, so let's get going. So I hope you've got yourself some paper and you've set out your pencils and got them all ready. So the first one is about getting a shading. So if I want to blend from one color to the next, so let me get an example over here. So let's say, for example, this guy over here. You want to get this nice shading. Let's take her out so we don't have that plastic shining on us. So let's say, for example, you want to get a nice blending from there to the tonal value over there. And you need it now nice and smooth. So the one way of doing it is to use different pencils. So you obviously know, let's grab a few pencils here. Each pencil has a different hardness to it. So your 2H is the really hard pencil. So he's going to give you a light tonal value, even if you press hard. And then you go all the way up to 6Bs and 8Bs. So the H means hard. So the higher the number, the harder the lead or the graphite is inside the pencil. So then you go, H's become HB. The B stands for black. Well, that's where I remember it. If it really stands for black, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I just remember it as black. H is for hard, B is for black. So now the higher the number on the B's, the softer the pencil, the darker the mark it's going to make with the same pressure. In other words, I can take these guys and I can get a full range of tonal values without pressing harder or softer. So let's pop them one side. So you'll see I've colored my pencils. Let's just arrange them again. I've colored my pencils with different colors to make it easier for you to see what number they are. So I've got from basically in the way they run along the color wheel. So the lightest one, the white, is hard. So now he's going to draw light, a little bit darker, 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 and then eventually I've got two more, a purple and a black. Darker and black obviously is the darkest. So it's all the way from white through to black. So let's just use these guys for now. So just take a scrap piece of paper. Now I want you to start with, say, your 2H, your hardest pencil. And then just with this exactly the same pressure, just draw an area. Fill in an area like this. So what you want is just to get it so that it's not stripy. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is the H. And now work next to it. And use exactly the same pressure as before. You want the hardness or the softness of the pencil to do the work for you. Go to the next one. In other words, as soon as you've got yourself a nice little area that's blocked in, Then you go over to the next pencil. Really important, 100% the same pressure with each pencil. So I want you to be able to see that each pencil, as it goes softer and softer, is going to give you a darker and darker mark. So with some pencils, like the H and the 2H's, you're not going to see as much of a difference, but if you look carefully, you'll be able to see the difference. So now I'm all the way down to a, what's this, 2B. Can you see how it's going darker and darker? And it's the same happening on your paper. So now I've got the 4B. I think seeing as I've got the 6 and the 8B, we might as well just do them, eh? But look at that, I'm already getting a shading happening there. So that's how important it is to change pencils as you draw. Because that means that you don't have to press hard while you're drawing in order to get the tonal value that you need. So as far as possible, you can just change pencils. Now, why would you want to do that? Why don't you just take one pencil and press harder and softer? The reason for that is because I'm not applying any pressure onto the paper. It means I can erase this 100%. I can get myself back down to raw paper again, or extremely close to raw paper. Hey, look at that. So I've got a beautiful little, almost a little tonal chart over there. I haven't pressed harder or softer. I've used exactly the same pressure all the way across. So that's number 1. Let's write down here. So that is a 2H, H, H, B, B, 2B, 4B, 6B, and an 8B. So I think you agree with me. By applying, just using different pencils, you'd be able to get all these shadings in that face. Can you see that? Let's put that from there to there. All those tonal values that we've got over there are here in her face. The only ones we don't have is the real darkest darks. So to get those guys, we would need to use method number 2. Method number 2 is to apply varying pressures. So the way that works is I can take these same pencils and just by applying different pressures, I can get different tonal values. So let's start off. We won't now do all these pencils. We'll do just say 2, 3 or 4 just to get the feel of it. So let's start off with say a 2H. So next to that, or underneath it, start off with the lightest pressure you can possibly apply. You want to just touch the surface of the paper and start coloring in. So I don't think we'll go all the way across to there. We'll maybe just go across to there, half the distance. Get yourself a nice even little tonal values, lay down there as soft as you can, and now gradually start pressing harder and harder as you move across. So it's not important how far you move across, it's just important that you gradually press harder and harder. And you're going to get to a point where you'll find no matter how hard you press, you're not going to be able to get any darker. So I'm now really scratching and scoring the paper there at this stage. Lighter and lighter, harder, harder, harder. But now by applying a varying pressure, can you see that I'm able to get a nice smooth shading? Let me zoom in on that just a little bit more. Can you see? It's pretty darn smooth. But I can only go so dark. So from there I'm going to have to use another pencil. So let's skip a few. And we go to say a B pencil. And we do the same exercise. So I'm going to press here as light as what I can. Absolute feather light touch. So now instantly, can you see what's happening? This here is darker than my lightest over there. Simply because the pencil is softer. So it's automatically laying down more graphite. Alright, so as I'm coming across, I'm pressing harder and harder. So I don't know if you're like me, as you go across, you tend to make your squiggles or your shading thinner and narrow, so it forms a pizza slice. So I'm trying my best to keep it equally wide in the end as at the beginning. I'm pressing as hard as I can there now. Softer as I go back, gradually releasing the pressure on the pencil. So eventually I've got a feather light touch over there. Okay, so can you see I've started off darker, but I've also ended off darker because of the softer pencil. So let's go over to say, let's do say a 6B for now. So what did we have here? Here we have a 2H, and here we have a B, and now let's do a 6B. Exactly the same exercise, super soft. And guess what? Instantly I'm starting off darker than even the B because the pencil is softer. As I go across, more and more pressure, more and more pressure. So eventually I'm going to press as hard as I can. Okay, so again, can you see I've started off darker, but look how nice and dark I've ended off because the pencil is really, really soft. So I'm completely filling in the weave or the texture of the paper. So now the secret of here, by applying varying pressures to get a nice, even, smooth shading, is to use overlapping strokes. So let's say just use this guy again, and let's just try and shade as quickly as we can. See what happens as you go along. You skip gaps. So then if you go over there again and you keep skipping gaps, then you find places that you end up going over more and less. So automatically, can you see what's happening? I'm getting lighter and darker areas. So that's not going to give you a nice smooth shading like we have over there. To get that kind of a smooth shading by applying varying pressures, you need each stroke to overlap the previous one. So as I'm going across, I'm just moving the pencil a hairbreadth along at a time. So first of all, I'm doing one just with an even pressure. And look at that, I get a beautiful even coloring, effortlessly. And we've already done the shading over there. Again, it was just overlapping strokes so that you don't get those little lighter and darker areas like that. All right, so let's move on. So that's right there is that's not overlapping, and that is overlapping strokes. Hope you can read my handwriting. Okay. Technique number 3 for shading is to use your finger. So let's say, for example, I have, let's put seeing as we've got the 6B in our hand, let's put on a nice dark area of 6B over here. Just a block, even shading. And then next to it, let's say use a B pencil to put on a lighter tonal value next to it. So we end up with 2 little squares next to each other. So now we want to blend those guys into each other. So now you can use your finger. I like to use just little circle motions. So what's happening then is you're blending the graphite, the loose graphite that's lying there over each other. Maybe I can do just one block with nothing next to it first. Okay, so we lay down a area, and as I blend, some of this loose graphite is moving to there, and that's giving me a shading. So now generally you'd find when you're using this, you need to use the really soft pencils and a light touch. So that the graphite is still lying quite loosely onto the paper, and then you get a better blending. Now this is the way that most people like to blend. They come in and they'll do all the shading work over here, and then they'll come back with their finger and they'll blend all these little marks and imperfections and stuff away. I used to do that, and you'll see in my classes, I almost never, although on the odd occasion, if it's just a little mark, I'd maybe just quickly squiggle it away. But 99.999% of the time, I'm going to use different pressures and grades of pencils to do the work for me. And I'll tell you why I don't like using the finger. Your skin has a natural oil on it. So what happens is the minute you blend like that, that oil penetrates the paper and it gets into the paper. And now you also, because of the pressure you're applying with your finger, you are really squeezing and forcing the graphite into that weave or the texture of the paper. And after that, it becomes practically impossible to erase over that. If you erase over that, it tends to leave really ugly marks. Let's see if we can get it to happen. And you also find your eraser slips. I can feel, because I've rubbed over there, my eraser slipping over that. Now, can you see it's made those marks over there? It's well into that. Let's zoom in on, focus in on that bit. Because my eraser is now slipped over this, because I've smoothed it out with my finger. You've got now those marks. You cannot erase those marks properly. It's always going to leave a mark. I can't get back to neat paper again. It's just not going to happen. What I'll also sometimes use, and this is technique number 4, is a stump or a cotton bud. Now, when that works nice, is like here with a finger, you can just quickly, blend a little piece away, a little imperfection, a little mark. Then it works great. But sometimes you've maybe got a corner or a little area. Let's say, for example, over here by the corner of the mouth. Now, I couldn't blend there with my finger because my finger is just simply too big. So let's say, for example, you've got that. You got that kind of a thing over there. And now you need to blend this piece over here. So I'm just going to lay down some tonal value there. So this is really nice and dark over here. And now I need to blend that into each other. So then a cotton bud, or earbud, or a Q-tip, call different things. He works great. See that? Because I can now nicely get into that little corner there. So that's when this guy works great. Now the trick to using him is you've got to keep turning it. As he picks up graphite, you don't want to now go and use that piece somewhere else, because look what happens. Let's say, for example, over here I need to shade something light. Now I've been blending something that's dark, and I come over here, and it's that's there is laying down. It's laying down graphite for me, which could instantly become too dark. And that there is the same as we had over there. You can't erase nicely over these guys. For the same reason, because you've now squeezed all that graphite into the weave of the paper. But you can get blendings like this. You see there? Not a problem. So the other thing is called a stump. Now you can buy paper stumps. It looks basically like the shape of a pencil. I don't have one because I don't use them. But you can make your own as well. So let me grab a scrap piece of paper and I'll show you how to make one. So I'll usually take a sheet of paper like this, and this is normally too big. So I'll take it in, fold the paper in half, give it just a good rub over there, because you want to split this guy into two. Okay, so before you make your stump, get yourself a piece of masking tape or sellotape and just tear it off and put it one side ready to grab, because you're going to need 2 hands for the job. So what you do is you take your finger and you put it somewhere in the center of the page, and then you take this hand and you just curl it over like that. So you see there, it forms like a pivot point. So what you're doing is you're forming an ice cream cone. You see that? So I'm forming an ice cream cone, and now I'm going to roll it around that initial tip or point that I made over there. So you've got that little sunshine effect as you're rolling it up. And that's what you've got. So you formed yourself looks just like an ice cream cone. And now depending on how you roll it up, let's see if we can get a closer view on this guy. Let's get that out the way to get some more contrast going there. So depending on how you roll it up, you can get this point over here super sharp. Let's do that. And you can also make it less or more sharp by holding this tip over here and then grabbing that inside tip over there and pushing and pulling it. Let's see if I can do this so you can see the tip as well. Okay, so I'm going to pull the tip. You see what's happened? It's gone bigger. And I'm going to push that tip. So it's going more and more out. And now that tip is going to go finer. Pulling it out again. Flatter. Pushing it in again. Finer. So once you've got the tip that you like, then you take your sellotape or your masking tape and you just tape that guy onto that guy there like that. So there you go, there you've got a stump. It's exactly the same thing. So now you can take that and use that for all your little fine area work. So now, for example, I'm going to lay a little bit of graphite down to there as far as I can go. And now you're using your stump. This is also called a tortillon, to blend into that little corner area there. And now if you've got a really skinny area, you can even take this guy and just pinch him to form like a real chisel point. So now you can blend broad areas at a time, turn him, and blend skinny little areas. So I know people really like using them. People use them on a constant basis. If you follow my classes, you'll see that I don't use them either. For the same reason as I don't like to use my finger, is because it rubs the graphite into the weave of the paper, and then you can't do erasing and stuff afterwards. However, it is nice for little skinny blendings and stuff in fine detailed areas. So if you're ever in that situation, it's good to know about that. So what you do is, if you do want to use your finger and you do want to use stumps and stuff, then this is what you do. You do as much blending as you can using your pencil, hardnesses, and using varying pressures on the pencil. So then you'll maybe get to this kind of a point. So let's do that guy over again. Let's repeat it over here, and then let's get that even smoother using your finger or the stump. I think I'm going to stop over there. You know what? Let's do this guy dark over here. So we do a full tonal range in this one. I'm going to go lighter and lighter and lighter to there. And now let's go over to a softer pencil, or a harder pencil, sorry. So let's say maybe go over to a B. We continue over here. So we've got the same tonal value. initially. I'm pressing lighter and lighter and lighter. So now we've used different pencils, we've used varying pressures. But now we want to get that really, really smooth. Just as that final smoothing. So now you can take your finger and blend these guys into each other. Or you can use your Q-tip to blend those guys into each other. Because now I know I've got all my tonal values, I've got everything right. I just want to get that extra last little bit of smoothing. Because what happens is because the paper's got a weave to it, it's got humps and bumps. So what happens is as you're drawing with your pencil doesn't get into those little humps and bumps. The graphite tends to lie on the top. And that's why you get that kind of almost a bit of a texture, depending on the type of paper that you're using. So that's when the finger or the Q-tip, little blending like that, helps you, because this now forces that bit of the graphite, the loose graphite that's lying in that area, into those little areas like that. Like I say, after this, you cannot go and erase there again, so you have to leave this kind of blending till very last, then you A4 away. So let's compare that guy to that guy. Can you see how nicely he's smoothed out from there? So yeah, it does have his place and time, so don't write it off. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is a method that I use super often, super often, because it's a great way of doing quick shadings and broad shadings. You'll find if you have to cover, let's say for example, this whole area over here, to try and do it with a pencil is insane. Absolutely insane. And it's something that I haven't known it for donkey's years. It's something that I stumbled upon the one day. I thought, gee, let me try this, and it worked great. Anybody who's done this class with me will remember that I spent half the class on the year, or 3/4 of the class, and then this year was maybe 1/3 of the class or 1/4 of the class, the actual mouth bit. It took so long to shade all this. And that was just simply because I didn't know about this next technique. And that technique is using the cloth. So to use the cloth, this is what you do. You take a scrap piece of paper. Before we continue, I want to briefly tell you about my real-time paint and draw along art classes on my website. For a very small amount, you can get access to over 400 paint and draw along tutorials where you pack out your art supplies and you follow along as I show and explain to you in step-by-step detail how to complete each project. There are classes in acrylic, oil, watercolor, pencil, soft pastel, and even lesser known mediums like pen and ink and sketchboarding. There's a link in the description below. Take a look. You'll be amazed at the awesome classes available there. Alrighty, let's continue from where we left off. So to use the cloth, this is what you do. You take a scrap piece of paper, then a soft pencil like a 6 or an 8B. So what I've got is I've got a graphite stick. And the only reason I use a graphite stick and not say this is a 6B graphite stick, and not a 6B pencil, It's just simply because this guy never needs sharpening. So that's why I use him and not him. Otherwise, it's the same thing, because this is just, the graphite stick has basically the graphite and no wood around it. So I never have to sharpen it. So I take a scrap piece of paper, and I don't put this over my drawing paper like I'm doing now. I would have it to the side of my drawing. And then I'll scratch over it like this. So you can see my piece of paper, I've been using it for donkey's years. Well, not really donkey's years, but for a long time. I'll use it for a few months. And eventually this becomes just so smooth that it doesn't accept any graphite anymore. Then I'll start over, fresh. So I'll rub that over there. So what I'm doing now is I'm just transferring some of this graphite onto there. And now I take an old t-shirting piece of cloth, a nice soft cloth, and I can rub this over here. So what's happening is that loose graphite that was lying there is now on this cloth. So I think let's leave this guy and let's grab a whole fresh new piece of paper. I'll show you how quick and easy it is to tone a piece of paper. So I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to rub him over there. So let's say just tone half of it so you can compare. Otherwise the camera is just going to see one tonal value. It's going to make it look all white. So I'm just rubbing over the I'm rubbing over here and rubbing onto here. And now, can you see I'm getting a nice, yeah, what the heck? I'm getting a nice even layer. Is it perfectly smooth? No, but if I'm doing broad areas, and now when would you want to do that? Let's go back to our example lady again. Can you see she's got an overall tonal value? Yes, there are a few little white highlights, but in general, she's got an overall tonal value. And that's her overall skin color. So by doing this kind of a thing, over this whole face area, before you even start, then you get that overall tonal value. You don't have to spend an hour or 3 hours getting that overall tonal value like there with a pencil, rub, 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 rub. And now I want to show you something that's quite interesting. Yeah, I had to get that overall tonal value and it took me forever in the class. You're welcome, go and watch the class and you'll see. We spend most of the class on the areas around. Which just shows you I learn just as much as you guys. I'm also constantly picking up and figuring out and learning new tricks. So let's see if I can zoom in. I want to show you the texture that I've got. I'm hoping the camera is going to pick it up. Okay, now I'm going to put the cloth shading behind it. I'm going to quickly rip this guy away so you can compare the two. So can you see there's still quite liney over there. Look at that. Beautifully smooth shading. Liney. Smooth. In other words, for me to do that ginormous guy over there, I could have just quickly used my cloth. And now what's nice about the cloth, and this is the magic of it, is I can erase this all the way back to absolutely sharp or pure paper again. So if I needed to lift out, let's say for example I was doing a nose or something and I had to lift out a highlight, I would just use my eraser. And I'd lift out that highlight. Or let's say it was teeth. And use let's get a so I'm just erasing marks to sort of suggest teeth. Can you see that? And now you could have come back in with your pencil and added the darks. So here you've got your dark of the lip. And they would be doing its shading and stuff out there. I'm obviously not going to draw the whole thing, but I can you see what's happening? How easy it is? To quickly get the basic shading happening on your page. Yeah, he looks like a little monster. There you go. Now, using the cloth, you can also get a little bit of shading as well. So let's pick up some of this. And I'm going to do rub over here. And as I move along, there's obviously now less and less graphite on the cloth. So it's laying down less and less graphite. And same with the pencil, you can apply less and less pressure as well. The only thing, the drawback of using the cloth is that you're not going to be able to go all the way to dark. So it works great for lighter tonal values. Let me see if I can go, see how far and how dark I can go. That's about as dark as you're going to get. So you're never going to get as dark as, for example, let's just pop some 6B down over there, pressing dark or hard, so you can get a comparison. Can you see that? That's as dark as I'm going to go using the 6B. I can rub all day. It's not going to go any darker than that. But this, I think you agree with me, gives you a nice little even shading. Alrighty, so that was number 5. So we're halfway through. Shading number 6 is using your kneaded eraser. So when you get your kneaded eraser, it comes in a block. So what I do with mine is I roll them into a ball. So, what the heck, while we're chatting about the kneaded eraser, somebody on YouTube was asking me the other day, they said, my kneaded eraser keeps sort of cracking. That usually happens when it's cold. So before I start drawing, just a few minutes beforehand, I knead my eraser. And I do it for 2 reasons. One is to stop that whole cracking story, because it's cold, the eraser just it becomes less pliable and becomes more brittle. So by kneading it, what you're actually doing is you're warming up your eraser. So I will knead it between my fingers like this, and I'll often even just press it down like that, fold it up, press it down, and fold it up, and so on. Just almost like you would knead bread. What you're doing is you're forcing some energy into there, and that's creating heat, and that's heating up your eraser, and eventually it becomes beautifully pliable. So that's the one reason why I give it a good little knead before the class. The second reason is, as you're erasing, it's picking up graphite. So let's do, say, that, and we rub it across there. Can you see it's picked up all that graphite over there? So that there will not erase anymore because it's full of graphite. So by kneading your eraser, can you see what's happening? Those little pieces of graphite are stretching out, spreading out, and you're exposing the neat, clean eraser around it. And by kneading your eraser like this, eventually it becomes nice and clean again. That bit of graphite that you've picked up embeds itself. Look at that. See there? It embeds itself into the eraser. So you can use your kneaded eraser for literally years and years and years by doing this. And can you see how nice and easy it's starting to, I can use it nice and easy now. It's nice and pliable because it's warmed up. Alright, so then what I do is I roll it into a ball. Like that. And then I roll it into a little tube shape. And that gives me a lovely rounded edge over here, which I can use for shading work. So normally I'll take this edge over here just to complete the shape of it. So that there gives me a nice point tip, which I can do erase little detail work with. If I needed to erase little lines or whatever, let's just do that. But I can, with this guy here, I can actually do shading. So what the heck, let's take that over there and let's do some shading with it. So you take this rounded piece and you just tap it with your eraser. So every time you tap it, it's obviously now lifting up some graphite. So it's not a smooth shading, but it's nice for little areas. Sometimes there's just a spotty area or so on. Let's just knead that guy again to get him nice and clean. Right. Sometimes you need to just gently lift up something. For example, let me see what can I show you as an example. Here's a great example. Can you see over there? That little highlight on the nose. This is the guy to do it with, because you've now got a basic shading over there. You've added maybe a few darks, and I just tap, 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 tap with your kneaded eraser, and there you've got that little shading going on over there. And then obviously after that, then you can just take your finger to soften it. Because when you do use the eraser, obviously it's lifting up a dot, right? So that's when your eraser's nice. I mean, look there, I had an edge like that over here, and now I've managed to fade it out. with a little practice you can get nice even shadings like this. But it's good for little areas, little funny pieces. Also, it's great for, let's say for example, you've got something like that there, where you've got an uneven area. So let's create ourselves an uneven area. Let's say for example you're trying to get this whole area here nice and smooth, and now you've got that little bit there that's just a bit darker than the surrounding areas. So that's when your kneaded eraser comes in quite handy. So I'm just going to have a nice, not a sharp point, just a dull point over there. And I'm going to very gently tap over this guy. Can you see that mark's nearly disappeared already? Feather light touch. So I'm shading using my eraser. There you go, it's gone. I'll finally use my eraser or my finger if I want to, just to get that final smoothing. But voila, there you go. So you've fine-tuned your shading to get that nice even smoothing on the areas of the skin. Okay, so similar to using a finger is you can use a brush to do some shading. So let's get some, and this also, it works in nice broad areas too. So let's put that guy down over there. Let's fade him out. So now there's two ways you can do it. You can use a really soft brush, or you can use a hard brush. So let's start off with a hard brush. I'll do this top area here with a hard brush. So we're really scrubbing it. You can even use an even harder brush. But now what's happening is, I'm just trying to get half of it done so we can compare the two. It's also just moving some of that loose graphite around. So by using the hard brush, it's aggressively moving that around. I'm going to quickly get an even harder brush. So you've got that guy there. Let's lay down some over here. Now I'm going to use the really hard brush, a really hard scrubbing brush. So that's now really forcing that graphite into the weave of the paper. Sometimes, however, you just want just a soft little blending. Let's say, for example, you've added just a little bit of graphite down there. So I'm using absolutely no pressure on the pencil. So now you use a soft mop brush. Just gently soften that last little bit out. So what the mob brush is also nice for is, let's say for example I want to add a little bit of tonal value, say over there. So I can go and steal some tonal value over here, because it doesn't make a big difference over there. I'm not going to really notice it because these bristles are so soft. But what it has done is it's picked up some of those loose graphite that is there. So if I now rub over here, but it's going to add some of it down there. Not a lot, really little. That's when you want to do really subtle little shadings. So let me just continue to add a little bit of tonal value there. And I'm going to erase an area just so that you can see how subtle that is. Can you see there? Initially you thought there was no pencil marks over there at all. There was no graphite. But that's that really light little soft shadings. Sometimes you want that. For example, if you've got an area like this, super subtle shadings, you find if you use your pencil, it'll often instantly go too dark. So that's where you can use, say, steal a little bit of graphite somewhere else and lay it down over here. So this is a mob brush. You can use the ones for doing makeup. It's the same thing. So I'm just adding some extra tonal value down there, just on those first two, and I can show you how super subtle details you can get by doing this. So I'm just gradually adding some more graphite back in those areas. So I'm negatively drawing now, because I'm now blending those guys darker again. And look at that. I get super subtle details by using the brush. That's something you cannot do with a pencil. There's just no way. You can sometimes get that blending with a finger, but with a nice soft brush like that, super subtle details. Pretty cool, eh? Didn't think of that, did you? Okay, so that was number 7. So we're heading down nicely now. Number 8 is using graphite dust and a brush. If you've done my dog drawing course, you'll know this trick. We did it over there. So let me quickly get that drawing just to show you what it looked like. This guy over here. So what we did was we actually put down graphite over here and then we rubbed it in using a brush. So let me show you how I do that. That's also great for doing sort of broad areaed quick shadings. And that I would often use before I learned about my my little cloth trick. Then I would use that. Nowadays I would actually use the cloth. So you just take your pencil, whatever you want. You can, let's say for example a 2H or whatever, and you take a knife. So like I say, this is not accurate because it's for broad shadings. Then you take your knife and you just scrape off some graphite in the areas that you want. So let's say for example I want a diagonal line running along there. But it's not a line, it's a shading. Trying to think of an example for you. Maybe I'm drawing the Milky Way. So I want the Milky Way running across here like that. So if I start shading, I'm not going to get that nice, soft, misty kind of effect, am I? So then you put down a little bit of graphite dust. Yeah, I think you can see that graphite dust quite nicely. Then you can take either your finger or a brush. And now you gently rub this graphite dust in. And that also now gives you a nice little shading. So let's say I want it darker over here. Just gently tapping it first, and I can rub it. Let's go darker. So this is all still just 2H work. The more graphite dust you scratch off in an area, the darker it's going to go. So you can see I've put more over there. Gently tap it. Just to settle it in so that it doesn't move around too much. And then you can rub it. So look at that, I've got a super gentle blending. Let me zoom in on that. Can you see how subtle that shading is? It's the perfect kind of shading for this kind of work. Perfect. So if you want to do a little, think of it as applying that foundation or whatever, what do you call it, the stuff you put on your, the ladies use in their face to sort of even the skin tone. This is the same thing. You're applying a little bits of powder. In this case, it's just graphite powder, isn't it? So there you go, and that's how you get that nice even little toning and blendings using a brush and the graphite dust. Right, so number 9 is polishing, and this is something that I did show you in the portrait course, but let me show you here so that it's all together. Right, so I'm going to lay down some graphite, but I'm going to do it rough so that we don't get an even shading. So I'm going to use different pressures and so on. I specifically don't want this nice and smooth. Alright, so now you've worked it, and now it doesn't matter, even if you've done perfect shading, you're gonna get times when you cannot just, even here, you're not getting that absolute perfect smoothness. And that's usually a function of the paper. The paper itself, the weave has got little humps and bumps, and it's not giving you a nice smooth shading. So I'm going to continue over here. With a pencil, you're obviously not going to try and get this as perfectly smooth as what you can. But you're going to get to a point like there, and you've just got those little lighter and darker dots and marks, and you don't want that. So what you do is, you go down to a harder pencil. So for example, here I've used the 6B. So I'm going to go down to, say, an HB. And I'll call this polishing. So in those little areas like there, where it's too light, we're using this little circular motion. I'm going to polish away those little marks. So this works best with a sharp pointed pencil. Because now this is like real, when you're getting to absolute super smoothing. And that's why I call it polishing, because you're using this little circular motion. So I won't do too much, but I will do just a little area to give you a good feel for what happens. So I'm coloring in the tiniest little imperfections in the tonal value. So I'm just working this little area over here. So I'm not applying any kind of a pressure. I'm letting the pencil do all the work. So the idea here, or the way this works, is that because I'm using a sharp pointed pencil and a pencil that's harder lead or harder graphite than what is in the surrounding area. Remember, we said your paper's got a bit of a weave and a bit of texture to it, right? Even if it's a super smooth paper like this. If you put it under a microscope, it's full of humps and bumps. And your soft pencil is only going to apply or adhere to the top humps and bumps. The harder pencil, if you apply, no matter what you do, it's going to get in a little bit more into those little grooves because it's harder. So to apply that pressure, or yeah, I don't know, it just does. Can you see how nice and smooth I've got this here already? I'm using a harder pencil, so it's technically not darkening anything around there. It's moving that graphite around, and it's laying a little bit of its own graphite. And that's how you get perfect smooth shadings like that. And that's exactly what I've done over here. I've gone and polished out all those little blemishes using a harder pencil. So if you've got I've used, say, a 6B. I'm polishing it, say, with an HB. So let's say I've got an area of an HB that I need to smooth out. Let me do this quite rough quickly. This polishing, it feels like it takes ages, but it actually doesn't. Because it allows you to here really use rough crisscrosses and stuff to fill in this area super fast. So you've saved a ton of time now by not trying to get perfect shadings. And now with HB, so I'll come back, say, with a 2H. And I can just come back in here and quickly polish out all those little uneven areas. And because whatever I'm laying down now is lighter than the surrounding area, all you're doing is you're just reducing the contrast between the graphite that's lying on the top of the bump and the graphite marks that you're laying now down inside the bottom of the valley of the bump. Let me draw that. I don't even know if it makes sense to me. If I look at this piece of paper under a microscope, it's going to do something like this. It's not perfectly smooth. There's little humps and bumps like that. So now I come over here with my pencil. Let's say an 8B pencil. So now I'm rubbing over here. And what's happening is the graphite's now getting stuck to there, to there, to there, to there, and so on. And there's no graphite inside those little valleys. So now you're coming in with a sharp pointed pencil and you're coloring in those little valleys over there. You're doing this kind of a thing. So because this is now lighter than that, you're seeing that tonal value. And that is just sort of, you're evening it out for your eye. So it's an optical illusion that you're creating. So you're still seeing that tonal value. But it's evening out the color for you. Can you see how quickly I've evened out this little piece over here? Like I said, I can polish this guy a little bit further for another minute or two, and he'll be perfectly smooth. Yet I've shaded that area within seconds. So you save yourself a ton of time doing that little polishing effect. Because I've taught you now a ton of different ways to get super smooth shadings. Absolutely super smooth shadings. Trick number 10 is knowing when you need to continue adding shadings and knowing when to stop. Because it doesn't help You got all these techniques, and you make, say, that too dark, or you make that too light, and everything looks flat. So then all your smooth shadings goes for nothing. So the trick is knowing when to start and knowing when to stop, or when to continue and when to stop. And that trick is to use a tonal chart. So if you go and look at the intro to pencil drawing class on the website, you'll see that. And I think I'll add a little tonal chart like this underneath the replay of the class. What you're basically going to do, let me find a photograph so that we can compare. Let's see, here I've got a photograph already. Okay, so as you're drawing, you take your tonal chart and you check what tonal value am I busy working with. So let's say, for example, this area over here. So I'm going to take a look on my tonal chart and see, all right, yeah, that one seems, it actually seems quite okay. That's too dark. So there, I need to get to that tonal value. So now you use your tonal chart on your drawing, and now you can compare. So all right, you know what, I'm there. Can you see white? If I get to white, it would be too light. The minute I get to that tonal value, the line between there and there disappears. Then you know your tonal value is the same. That's why I can see this is too dark. Can you see? Because there's a line where this one stops and that one starts. There isn't really a line where this one stops and that one starts. So I know these two tonal values are roughly the same. So now you carry on and you go around to, let's say, over here. So now I'm going to check that tonal value. That tonal value seems to be roughly that. Can you see that there's sort of in between? So somewhere over there, right, is that tonal value. So now you're drawing and you're doing all your shading work and everything, and you're getting to there and you think you're right. So then you put down your tonal chart and see, all right, where am I? Too light. Can you see? I can see a line. There's a gap between those two. As soon as that line sort of starts disappearing on you, like there, I'm at that tonal value at the moment. So I go there. Now I can see a line. So this one's too dark again. So here, this is where I am at the moment. And that guy there told me this one's still a bit too light. I was in between those two. So I need to darken up this area actually a little bit more, because I needed this guy to look a little bit lighter than there. I need this guy to look darker. I need to be in that area of the tonal chart. In an ideal world, you have a continuous tonal chart that looks like this. So now you can get a more accurate positioning. I can see a line that's too dark. Or the line seems to be disappearing around here. So let's remember that point. Let's go further down. Yeah, you see I'm seeing a line again over there. So that's the point I need to be at. So let's see, that is, let me just get to there. It was over there. And let's compare. Where am I now? I'm doing it the wrong way around. Let's quickly do it here on the photo. Okay, so I've got that tonal value. So I need to be over there, sort of directly over that BA. Now I check it over my drawing. And I can see I'm actually around, sort of around there, that tonal value at the moment. So I need to still darken up that area just a little bit more. So that's how you use your tonal chart to know whether to continue shading or whether you've shaded it enough. And by doing that, you're going to get beautiful depth in your drawings, because now you've gone just the right darkness, or just the right, or you haven't added too much so that you've gone too dark. You've got to have those nice contrast between your lightest light and your darkest darks. And that's what gives you that depth and dimension in your drawings. So it's all good using these nice little techniques like the cloth to lay down a shading, but it's easy to go too dark. And there you've lost all your depth. So you've got to know when's the right time to go too light or too dark. All right, so let me do a quick recap there for you of the 10 different techniques. So number 1 is using different pencil grades, HB, B, 2B, 4B to go darker and darker. Applying various pressures. So let's say you're using your HB, and you press super light, gradually darker and darker to give you a nice range. Use your finger. Finger's great for just quick little areas of quick smoothing out. So you're not going to get you're not going to go get a full tonal range using your finger. It's going to give you just a small little adjustment of the area, because what it does is it just moves that little bit of graphite, loose graphite that's lying in that area. It moves it around. The next one is using a stump or a cotton bud. So the difference between that and a finger is A, you can work finer, but B, it tends to get more into the grain of the paper. So you'll find you can blend it with your finger stump. You can blend with your finger, and it'll just give you a little bit of a shading. You can immediately come back in with a stump or a cotton bud. Because it's harder and applies more pressure, you can do even more shading with that. The next one's a cloth. So the cloth is great for nice broad areas of laying down quick tonal values and basic little shadings. So you'll find what I do, let's say for example, if I'm doing let's use this guy. I can very quickly lay down just a little bit of tonal value, add a little bit more over here, add that basic little dark line in over there, and get myself quickly establish a whole bunch of little tonal values, and from there I can smooth them out even further and fine-tune them even further. So the cloth works really great for those broad areas. Number 6 is the kneaded eraser. So that's also just fine little areas that you want to fine-tune. Let's say you've got an area especially that's just a little bit too dark. You just do your eraser and you just go tap, 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 and it'll smooth it out for you. Or if you want to lift out little highlights and things, just tap, tap, tap. Or you can rub and then press, rub harder and gradually rub softer and softer. So you can do shadings with an eraser as well. Okay, the next one is using a brush. So the brush ties in, it's similar to a finger or a stump, but it's a lot more subtle. You're not going to get as hard and as heavy shading as what you would. So if I had to choose between using my finger or a brush, I'd rather use the brush, because the brush hasn't got that oiliness that your hands have got. Because sometimes when you use your hands, you got that sweaty or an oiliness, it leaves a mark. And even if you pencil over it, it'll leave a mark. Okay, so number 8 is using graphite dust and a brush. That's also beautiful for lovely subtle shadings. But again, it needs to be reasonably broad areas. But you can get lovely smooth shadings using that. And also, you can't, same with the cloth, you can't go too dark. You're a little bit limited by the darkness areas, darkest areas. To get smoothest in the darkest areas, then it's better to use the different brushes and the different pencils, and then just finish off using, say, a Q-tip. All right, so number 9 is polishing, and that's when you put in your broad shading using the darkest pencil that you need to get the tonal value correct. Then you come back with a harder pencil. So let's say, for example, you've done an area with a B, then you can come back in with a 2H, with a harder 2H pencil, and you just polish those little unevennesses away. And those unevennesses are because of the texture of the paper. So polishing works really well when you're working on a rougher paper. Then polishing really comes into its own, because you don't get that nice automatic smoothness like you get on the paper that we've used today. And then the last one, number 10, is using a tonal chart to check that you've got the right tonal value on your shading that you've added. Because it doesn't help you've got all your beautiful shadings from all the techniques I've shown you, and the tonal value is wrong, because then it's pointless. So that's my 10 techniques to get perfect shadings every time. So thank you very much for joining me in the class today. I've had great fun, and I hope you've learned a lot. I'll see you next time.